All right, so this is what town meeting time says. It specifically as regards a quorum for a committee. A majority will be a quorum for any meeting, and a committee may act by a majority of those present and voting at a duly called meeting at which a quorum is present. That doesn't help. That doesn't answer our question.
Hello.
Hey, Pat.
Hi.
Bob, Dan, Tim,
Melanie.
I see Melanie.
Melanie. Yeah, Melanie. So I think we need one more would give us a quorum no matter whose set of what set of math we want to use.
I'm glad you guys are doing the math.
And Melanie, welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm not expecting Gene. I'd be thrilled if he was able to attend, but I don't expect him. So the selectmen are ready to go when you are.
All right, so we got Bob,
I see
Tim.
Deb Warren. We got it, Deb Warren.
We got it.
Oh,
All right.
there we go.
Excellent. Thank you, Deborah.
Hi, everyone.
Hi there. So we now have a quorum of the Finance Committee, and I guess we'll just call the meeting open at 1:02. And Rob, I guess you got to do the same.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so yeah, I have 1:02 p.m. on July 15th, and selectmen have a quorum. I hereby call this meeting with the Board of Selectmen and Advisory Committee to order.
Okay. So I think we just turn the floor over to Allison at this point.
Yeah, so I sent around a document to everyone. Not sure if you got a chance to look at it. It was from earlier this morning, but basically this meeting, this joint meeting is per municipal finance law, a joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee have to approve any year-end budget transfers between personnel and operating accounts as well as capital accounts. So that's what we're going to be presenting to you. So I'll share my screen with the document that I sent around earlier today, just so it's in front of us. A minute. Okay. Are you all seeing a document on the screen right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I tried to lay this out as simply as I could. So I did it in a series of transfers. There's 13 of them, and I thought that we would just walk through the document and then you can, ask any questions along the way. So basically, the first transfer that's showing here is there's a small deficit in grant match account, which is under the Board of Selectmen. So every year we've been appropriating a flat $25,000 for this grant match account that we use for various grant matches throughout the year. And it just fell a little bit short this year because we had payments for the Metropolitan Area Planning Council for their work on the housing production plan. And then we had a couple of payments to Sustainable Coastal for their work on the CZM grant. And so that just went a little bit over budget, which I'm proposing to cover with available funds in the town administrator's budget. Does anyone have a question on that?
No. Should we vote these individually as they occur, or?
I think you usually take a vote at the end.
Good.
Yeah, to vote on the entire the
Okay.
entire document.
That's fine.
Okay. So the second transfer, you'll see there's a deficit in building inspection purchase services. And this is because the building department and Tony made the decision to purchase a cloud permit software. So it's an online permitting software for the building inspectors to use. And so that decision was made after the FY25 budget was set, but Tony made that in mind, knowing that we had budgeted some money for the short-term rental inspection wages, which we knew weren't going to be taking place right away because the short-term rentals are just undergoing licensing and registration. So I'm proposing to move $5,780.47 from that short-term rental inspection account to the building inspection purchase services account to cover that. Okay, the next one, the third transfer, is there's just a small deficit of $83.12 in building inspection supplies that I'm suggesting to cover from the building inspection training salary budget where there is a surplus. So again, this is a small one. I think someone's in the waiting room. Hold on a minute. Like Josie's here, admitting, in the library. For the fourth transfer, there's a small deficit in the plumbing gas training salary account of $955. So, you know, our local building inspectors and plumbing and gas inspectors are all part-time. Every time they take a class for a recertification or any type of course, they receive a $50 stipend. So in plumbing and gas, that inspector took a larger number of courses this year than in prior years. And so that's the reason why this was a little bit overspent. There's available funding in the other inspectors' training salary budgets that I'm proposing to move to cover that. The next transfer, Council on Aging just had a small deficit in its purchase services account. They had a lot of repairs to the COA van that were paid from the purchase of services account, as well as I think they had to buy new tires, you know, a couple of unexpected things that came up through the year. So that's why they're a little bit overspent. They do have a surplus in the transportation salary account. And the reason for that surplus is because of the state COA formula funding that came in. It actually came in higher. The dollar amount per senior was higher than we had originally anticipated. So that's why there's a little bit of surplus here, and we're able to move it to purchase services to cover that deficit. And transfer 6 is for the fire department. And I think the fire chief is on. Austin?
Yes, I'm on.
So if you want to talk to this one.
Sure. Yeah, we had another pretty rough year as far as our staffing. We began this past fiscal year with 2 full-time employees out injured. And we had four of our 8 full-time employees at some point in the year were out for a significant amount of time. 2 were work-related injuries that required surgeries. The other was not work-related, but a surgery that had a significant recovery. And we currently have 1 employee out. So there was a lot of filling shifts by the other personnel who were available. But obviously that, you know, anytime they fill a shift, 24-hour shift, when we have a full-time employee out, it gets filled in overtime. So that drove up some significant overtime bills. Fortunately, had an idea that that was going on. So I was able to hold back on some training and purchase of some supplies and things like that to retain some funds, trying to avoid a reserve fund transfer. But anyway, that's why the IOD overtime filled deficit is so large.
Yep. So in the fire department budget, as Austin said, there's savings in a variety of operating expenses that will transfer to cover this overage in salary. Thanks, Austin.
Sure.
So the next transfer, for information technology, we don't usually budget for salaries, but we in fact paid salaries this year. And that's because we lost our assistant treasurer collector during the summer last year. She left unexpectedly, and so we had a vacancy for a number of months. That we asked Kathy Famulari to come back, our former treasurer, to come back and help us assist the treasurer in a lot of the day-to-day things. And then once we hired our new assistant treasurer collector, she also helped us to train her. So we paid Kathy for her time, and I paid it out of this line item. And so what I'm proposing to do is move some money from the treasurer's budget, the surplus in purchase services, move it to cover, the cost of having Kathy come and help us out during that vacancy. The next transfer is for a deficit in the Veterans Purchase Services account. We had, so the Veterans account, it pays for veterans benefits for veterans who are residents in town and meet certain income threshold requirements or have certain medical expenses. And so we had one veteran come on to benefits that we had not originally budgeted for, and that's why it drew a deficit here. One thing to note is that we do receive a portion of this amount reimbursed from the state, and that comes into the general fund. But since on the budget side, there's a deficit here that we have to cover, I'm proposing to move money from our health nurse salary account. So as you're aware, the public health department, we budget for a health inspector, and our public health nurse, we have two that we pay on an hourly basis. In COVID, those budgets were greatly increased and for the year following, and we've slowly been starting to decrease those, but we've still budgeted for them. So while we have been paying, the nurses hourly for work that they're doing, there is a savings that we're able to transfer for the veterans account.
Allison, on the Veterans Purchase Services, is that part of the property tax relief?
No.
So it's something else.
It's something, yeah. So it's actually, it's an actual benefit. We cut checks to 4 veterans in town that meet, they have certain medical benefits that are reimbursed by us, or certain income requirements that we help to pay. So they all work with John Lazar. He's the one that qualifies them for this program.
Do we know the total dollar amount? So we were 5,200 short. Do you know the total dollar amount for the Veterans Purchase Services?
Yep. Hold on, let me just still sharing my screen, so you're gonna see a bunch of stuff flying across. Hold on. Maybe I'll move this over so it doesn't confuse you guys. But you can still see it. Let me just pull up his last report. So this is, you can all get to see a nice Munis report. This is the Veteran Services account. So you can see that we originally budgeted $30,000 at the beginning of the year.
Okay. And
So we do for the FY26 budget, we've now included this person who came on. And so if, we have sufficient money in the FY26 budget to cover all the veterans that are currently covered. However, if one person happened to qualify and come on benefits, we'd fall into the situation again in FY26.
or some of the existing veterans could go to their reward.
Right.
You have a way with words, don't you?
Cheery.
That's that. So transfer number 9, this one, we're basically, I'm proposing to use the remainder of what's left in the reserve fund of $141,000 to cover a bunch of different deficits in different areas that we have. So the first one is in legal services. There's a deficit of just over $61,000 after paying all of our June bills. The second line, there's a deficit in military housing.
Allison, what was that 61,000, or what was going on that we did 60,000 more than expected?
So the past few years we have exceeded our legal budget. Again, we budget pretty, we try to budget conservatively, but we've had to tighten the budgets year over year. FY25 was a tight budget year. The legal services fees goes to pay KP Law and Dan Script for their services. And it's from everything from, if we consult them for personnel issues, their contributions to town meeting, collective bargaining, questions.
Does any of this belong to Coast Guard housing?
Some of it does belong to Coast Guard housing, yes.
So
it does not, none of it has to do with Northeastern. So
shouldn't, if it belongs to Coast Guard housing, shouldn't it go over there?
No.
Wherever over there is.
Yeah, no. So we cannot pay any of these bills from the Coast Guard housing proceeds. The only eligible uses of the proceeds from the sale of the properties is for any costs incurred in the actual sale of the property, and anything else, it has to be something that you would otherwise borrow on a long-term basis.
But wouldn't legal fees be a normal cost of selling the properties?
Or
are these legal fees for something else?
Maybe evictions?
Yes, it's for the eviction. So it's not in relationship to, it's separate.
Okay.
So that is what is included in here as well.
Okay.
And kind of leading into that for military housing, we haven't been budgeting anything for the military housing because we intended to sell all the properties and not have any, costs incurred. But as you know, there is still one tenant there that we've continued to pay for like routine maintenance costs and the such. So there is this deficit of $15,000 here on that account.
You'd suggest this is Nahant's cost of being a landlord.
Yes.
Yes. Gives one pause, doesn't it?
Because we're talking about paying for that stuff, can I ask where we are in that eviction process?
Yes. So my understanding is that we've received an appeal. So I believe from the individual who remains in the house, and my understanding is there's ongoing legal proceedings. I don't know if Rob might have any more information. That's as far as I know.
Yeah, Allison, I think that's about as far as we can go. We are still in litigation.
That's a hefty legal bunch of fees.
Again, the cost of being a landlord.
Yep.
So the next two lines are in the school budget. It's public school transportation and special education transportation. I invited the superintendent to join us, Rob, and I believe he's on the call if he wants to speak to this.
Yeah, the transportation overages are due to unanticipated placements that occurred after when the budget occurred, or change in placements. One specific change was from a low-cost location to a change to a transportation of students into Boston as a result of their special ed needs. And the transportation amount on that was much, much larger. So that basically makes up those.
And so you'll see for these, I'm just recommending, especially for the sped transportation, just a portion of the reserve fund to cover it. You'll see in the next transfer request that there's savings in other school line items that will cover the remainder of that deficit. But, you know, Rob had once, you know, when these cases came before him, Tony and I were made very well aware of it. As we started the budget process in December, I think a few things were still in flux, but we were aware that we were going to encounter some kind of deficit. We just finished paying all the bills, and so these are the final figures.
This would be a question for Rob. So we picked up an incremental cost of 85,000 to provide transportation to a different location for the special needs students. Was there a different cost in the IEP execution by the institution that they had to go to?
Well, it was really, the largest amount was a change in the actual location the student was going to, because the placement could not handle the child's needs. So they had to be replaced into a different location at a more expensive rate, not only on the tuition side, but because of the distance into Boston on the transportation side.
Yes,
So
I assume this line item covers transportation, but do we see the tuition downstream here, or was that budgeted?
Tuition, I think, came out okay in the end. The total amount for for tuition was okay. It was the transportation where we got nailed.
Okay.
And that's one student.
I believe there was 2 students involved in that transportation change.
Okay.
So then just the final item in this one is for health insurance. And as we've spoke, as we were preparing the FY26 budget, the health insurance premium rate jumped up over 18%, which was shocking to us. And so there's an overage in June because in June we have to pay at the July premium rate. So it affected our last month of FY25 as well, that big premium increase. So I'm proposing to cover a portion of it through the reserve fund, and then you'll see in a later transfer covering the rest of it from other sources.
Why are we transferring more than the deficit in military housing?
Oh, good question. And I meant to mention that. Thanks, Bob. It's because we haven't received the June bill yet from hall management. So the 15,000 reflects expenses only through May. And I'm expecting another, over $1,000 to pay for June.
Got it.
All right, so this is what I kind of alluded to before. The rest of that special education transportation overage is to be covered from a variety of surpluses in various school accounts. So really, we're just pulling from all remaining available funding sources in the school department to cover the rest of the overage in the sped transportation.
Okay, but we don't really have any purview over this.
You do.
We do.
Yes, and
We,
it's
we just
because
vote school budget as one line.
no, you vote transportation separately. So that's the reason why
Okay,
this
yeah.
needs to be
Okay.
approved.
So
So
we-
you vote a school number, you vote a transportation number, and you vote for the Essex Tech appropriation.
Okay, so we
separately.
we don't care about all the details in the first half. We
No,
just care about
exactly.
yeah, okay,
Yeah,
got it.
so this you don't necessarily care about because you do vote that as a lump sum. But I'm being transparent and showing
Right,
you,
yeah,
where
care is the wrong word.
Does the
We
school
care
committee
about
have
it,
to
but we
also
don't have
approve this?
Yeah, the school committee approves all those transfers as part of their last meeting in June. And what we had done, the reason why those show balances is we realized in December that between anticipated tuition and transportation, which we knew was going to be over, we did not want to be asking for large sums at the end of the year. So we put out a spend and request only as necessary, as opposed to spend your budget line. And our folks complied with that, as you can see. So in educational supplies, as an example, it wasn't over budgeted by 7,000. We asked people to be very careful in what they chose to get and to really have a need for that rather than say, well, we got appropriated that amount, let's spend that amount. And our folks were really good about that to help out the cause, I guess is the best term.
again, the next transfer, I alluded to this before, to cover the rest of that health insurance deficit. I'm proposing to move funds from this human resource services fund. We've been budgeting for a couple years now, 25,000. It falls under the town administrator account. And the thought was, if we needed to outsource any, kind of human resource activities, we did use these funds a year ago. We hired Clifton Larson to do a compensation study. We were thinking of, hiring Clifton Larson, on an hourly basis to maybe help organize some of our personnel files. But I want our assistant treasurer collector, who also serves as our human resource generalist, is new to the position. And I wanted to get, her to get some more work under her belt and then come up with some recommendations on where she might need some assistance from an outside source. So that's why we haven't spent any of this money in FY25. And so I'm proposing to use it for the health insurance overage. This one is pulling from literally all available, funding sources that are left to cover our snow and ice deficit. So if you remember, we usually have an article at town meeting where I have a good idea of what the snow and ice deficit is and how to cover it. For this town meeting, I wasn't so certain. So that's why we didn't vote on it at town meeting, and I'm bringing it forward now. We've paid all the snow and ice bills that have come in, and these are really the available funding sources that I've patched together in order to cover that deficit. Snow and ice is the only deficit that a municipality is allowed to raise on the following year's tax rate. So worst case scenario, if there wasn't any available funding, a town is allowed to run a deficit in snow and ice and then raise it as part of the following year tax rate. We do not have to do that. And there are available funding sources.
All right. So we're not kicking the can into the next year. We're doing it within the same year, basically by turning over all these rocks.
Correct. However, you'll notice that, some of these accounts, for instance, town hall capital, I have town hall capital in here. I have cemetery capital in here. These are for capital projects that were initially planned to take place in FY25. We held off on because the budgets were tight and I knew we had overages in certain areas. And so I'm using some of this capital money to cover snow and ice deficit.
So I can't help but notice that we're getting a lot of money from a bunch of insurance accounts. Did we not buy insurance? What happened?
No, we certainly bought insurance. We have the same insurance coverage that we've always had. What I had done in planning the FY25 budget at the time, we weren't sure of what the insurance increases were going to be for the premiums. So I had budgeted a little over 6% and they didn't come in that high. So I had budgeted 6% over the prior year's budget numbers. So when we were planning the FY26 budget, and the FY26 budget we all know is very tight. I looked at the FY25 expenses, particularly in these insurance line items against the budget, and right-sized some of them. So for FY26, many of these insurance lines have a decrease. So it's a combination of the two. I had done a larger, than necessary increase for FY25. Plus, we didn't do that exercise of right-sizing those budgets to match the expenditures. Nothing on the insurance side has changed.
Allison, I see that we've got about $40,000 in snow and ice purchase services. What type of services are we purchasing? Is that third-party plowing services, or
Yep.
as we
Some
look
of it,
at what we do in-house and what we pay somebody from outside to do?
Yep. So some of it is third-party plowing services. Some of it is, and I invited Zach to be on here so we could speak more specifically to this, but he's not here. Some of it is just equipment. Like we'll rent equipment to do some of the snow removal or snow moving, things of that nature. Obviously the standby and the overtime are for our
Sure.
in-house employees that are doing the work. And then general supplies, most of this is salt related expenses.
Right, we would have to purchase the consumables. My only thought was what we're doing in-house versus hiring outside third parties to do. And there's obviously a break point in that where it's more economical to hire a third party than to buy, a fourth snowplow. And I'm just wondering what exactly is happening with that make-buy decision.
Right. So again, I don't know this 39,000. I'd only be able to see what the vendor information is. Zach would be able to talk more specifically to that. But I also think we're bringing on outside companies to help us when we have a very small DPW, as you know. So when we don't even have enough people to provide the services.
I know in years past, some of this could have been hiring a company to clear snow off of a roof. It's not unusual that we'll bring in a company with additional backhoe or loader that can move the snow out of the areas. Not so much for this round for sure, because we had a comparatively easy winter, but I think that account has probably absorbed various significant loads over the years, depending on what kind of weather we got. You know what? I wonder, Allison, maybe you could get a little information from Zach and just send it out in an email to everybody, just to give us a little bit better perspective.
Yep. I can do that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it looks like as though it's a make-buy decision, and that's an area where we can either do well or take a haircut. And I just like to keep an eye on that ongoing thing. It probably makes sense. It definitely makes sense to have third parties doing these specialty works that Rob Thibault just described, rather than attempt to have the equipment and expertise to do it in-house. But at the same time, we want to be aware of in maximizing what we can do in-house. And it seems as though we're constantly appropriating capital for new trucks for the DPW.
Yep. Yeah, I can certainly get something from Zach on that, so. Okay. And then there's one final transfer for the assessor's office, and Sheila is on the meeting to discuss this further.
Yeah, so hello. I have regular part-time salaries that was used by a college intern. And so I did not use the salary as the assessor's clerk position. So I had an abundance of money left over, $9,813.36. I also did not use my special appeals, and that was for a Boston Gas Appellate Tax Board case that actually got dismissed. So we did not have to spend that. And I did have money left over in my general supplies, $1,604.17. And so a transfer amount of all of that does not equal the $7,800 that I'd like to be transferred to the purchase services, which is needed for finishing up my mapping.
So there are invoices that have not yet come in.
Correct.
Who's doing is this mapping GIS wise? Or
Yes.
What are we talking about here? Okay.
Yes, both the actual physical and the actual online.
And who's doing that for us?
It is Cartographic Associates Incorporated, and they're out of Littleton, New Hampshire.
Okay, thank you.
So I am requesting $7,800 to be transferred from those three accounts, but one is from a salary line item. So I think you have to do something maybe special on that. I'm not sure.
No, that's the purpose of it. So really,
Okay,
all
good.
they have to technically approved is this transfer into there, because you're able to move within operating budget accounts. But
Okay.
again, we're being transparent and showing all the
Everything.
moves.
Yes. Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
my request.
And this is for work that's already been done, but we haven't received a bill yet?
Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
okay. All right.
Yes.
And so that is the total of everything. I did send another spreadsheet that shows, it just shows all the to's and the froms in a summary form. I don't know if you care to see that. I can pull that up. Hold on. Again, sorry for going through all. So here, this is, an overall summary. It shows all the transfer from accounts that we already stepped through. So it totals, the transfers total this, $420,530.30. And then it transfers to each of these accounts that we walked through. So you can see that, it's a balanced to and from.
So we need a motion to approve this up or down?
Yep, and so I have the motion here at the top. If each committee wants to take the motion.
Do we have further discussion among the FinCom troops here?
Nope. And if not, we entertain this motion.
I will make the motion in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 33, capital B, small b, the Board of Selectmen, with concurrence, the Finance Committee authorizes the transfer of funds from one appropriation to another as listed in the document provided by the Finance Director.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, motion has been made and seconded, so a roll call vote. Dan,
I'm going to vote aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Deborah,
Aye.
Melanie.
Aye.
Trying to do this in Dana. No, wait. So Dana, you have not been sworn in yet, so we will bypass you. I thought Josie was on this.
And Bob, I just had a hard time with the video, but Josie Screese is sworn in this morning. My vote is aye.
All right, so you may indeed vote then. You get to say aye or nay.
Aye.
All right, and Bob votes aye, so that is a unanimous vote in favor. Did I, Melanie, I got you, right?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
All set. So for Selectmen, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 33BB, the Board of Selectmen, with concurrence of the Finance Committee, authorizes the transfer of funds from one appropriation to another as listed in the document provided by the Finance Director. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Pat O'Reilly, aye.
Rob Tibbo, aye. Motion carries.
Excellent. All right, so that is it. Before, well, Rob, if you want to adjourn your meeting, that's fine. There are two very quick things on the Finance Committee side.
Okay.
Like very quick.
Motion to adjourn the Selectmen.
Seconded.
Roll call vote.
Pat O'Reilly, aye.
Rob Tibbo, aye. We are adjourned. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so Finance Committee, I was a little bit multitasking during that, and my research says Tim is right that a quorum is a majority of the stated membership of the committee without regard to any vacancies. So if it's a 9-man committee, but there are only 7 members and 2 vacancies, you calculate the quorum against the 9.
Oh,
Yeah, I know. Oh,
really?
I'm gonna. There's only one exception. Where if your bylaws specifically call out otherwise. So I'll do a little more research, but it does look like we need to calculate our quorum based on the stated membership. So that's thing number one. Thing number two, Tim, you can help me with this. 3A, the planning board has begun their work of discussions, public meetings, and so forth, leading to recommendations regarding 3A. Allison, I believe the idea is still to have a special town meeting sometime in the fall.
Correct.
Regarding that. And that would require a booklet and a recommendation from our committee. So Tim, you have graciously volunteered to be the liaison for that. I'm planning to sit in on the planning board hearings as best I can, and anyone else is welcome.
Yeah, I would encourage another a second liaison, if not you, Bob, a second non-chair member. Just because there's a lot of meetings, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to catch all of them, and who will probably be the ones writing the bulk of the recommendation.
The other thing we could do is have a rolling second, couldn't we?
Anybody who can show up is great. It's Tuesday nights, so tonight. and next Tuesday. And then I believe the following Tuesday,
Right.
etc.
And they're doing it with Zoom?
Yes,
All right, so we
there's
just,
both in person and Zoom, but yeah.
so look in the community calendar. But they are planning to have a draft set of recommendations to us by, I don't remember the date.
August, I believe,
It was
like
sometime in-
August 19th, maybe. And hopefully they're final. So they're also gonna, I believe in early August, they're gonna have some hearings just to finish up. And then like the 19th, I think, is the preliminary report, and then the 26th of August is the final report to us. And just so you know, the recommendation is going to be to designate it related to the Bass Point Apartments, because if they can get somebody to do whatever it is, it winds up being much more beneficial than any other location that they've looked at. And I'm encouraging them to, as much as that's it, great, but they need to really sell the town on the other places that they looked at and why the Bass Point Apartments property would be the best.
And I was on the housing committee for some time.
Josie, you are really breaking up, and at least I cannot understand a word of what you're saying. If that is Josie, I assume it is.
Yeah. But it would be really good
Can you
stuff
hear
if
me
you
now?
can hear it.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, you went out again.
Now you're back to being garbled again.
One second. Can you hear me, folks?
Great.
Yeah.
There we go.
Better? Okay.
Yeah.
So I was on the housing committee for some time, and Bass Point was discussed at length. At the time, the consultants from the state had said that Bass Point was not acceptable because it was in a flood zone, so they were not going to approve that. We did discuss quite extensively with them. Looking at that again, I just believe that the state will not allow it because of the flood zone. Just want to keep that in mind.
Okay.
Great background information. The most recent consulting expert has talked about how the state approval area is different than the flood zone map. And he believes
dear.
that they can do a large enough area. It might require a neighboring property. I don't remember. That's a possibility. But the state approval map is different from the flood zone map, and that's why that was one of the things come up. I do not purport to be an expert on it, but that's great for us to be aware of.
All right. So
Yeah, that's new information. At the time, it was discussed to death, and they said it wasn't going to happen. So if that's new, that's wonderful. It's a good option.
okay. So I didn't intend kind of to have a discussion on the merits and the details today, unless you really want to, but more to
No,
keep
it wasn't on the
everyone.
agenda, so I'm not sure you should
Yeah,
have too much
exactly.
of a detailed discussion.
You took the
Thank
words
you.
right out of my mouth. So what I was thinking was we could have a meeting in early August when there have been at least some deliberations and potentially some public meetings, just to kind of get a sense of where everyone is headed and what the likely controversies are going to be. We could have a second meeting either on the day of or shortly after they present their preliminary report, their preliminary recommendations. And then we would likely have a third timed against the special town meeting to prepare our recommendation that would go out in advance of that special town meeting. So there would be one finance committee meeting, call it, maybe second week of August, a second following their I can't talk today, preliminary recommendations, which is more like the latter third of August. And
I
then
think to the
I don't
19th.
know when the town meeting is going to, special town meeting is going to be.
Bob, my question is there current or incremental spending related to 3A compliance? Do we have a dog in this fight? If there's no spending involved, is this even our baby carriage to push?
Okay, so we are more than just a budgeting mechanism, and this is talking about a change to the zoning bylaw, and we are obligated to draft a recommendation for
Yep.
the special town meeting. That's, I believe, the priority.
Yeah, we are the advisory and finance committee. So, I mean,
And
we
Bob,
may
I would
choose to
suggest-
not, we may choose to punt, but
Bob, I would suggest having a first meeting after we get the preliminary,
Right, I was gonna
and maybe
say,
a second meeting after we get the final a week later.
wasn't the preliminary on the 19th of
I
August?
believe so.
So we could do it right then,
yeah, well, my only concern, and I don't feel all that strongly about it. If we have something we want to raise and perhaps offer as our input to the planning board, it would be best to do that before their preliminary recommendation. That was my thought.
That point is well taken, Bob. I agree with you.
Okay. I defer.
And Dana, you have your hand up.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, hi, everybody. This is Dana Sheehan. Not on the committee yet, but I expect to be shortly. Just a point about 3A. The public input has not really been robust at this level yet from the planning board, and they seem to be kind of getting towards a decision without that public input. So I'm just going to throw it out there to the committee, the finance committee, that maybe our meeting should be sort of timed after we get more public input, and so we can hear where the town is on the 3A decision. That's just a comment, and it may, I don't know, it's going to sound like a suggestion, but just put it out there for everybody. Thank you.
Give me a moment. I think I know when the public meeting is scheduled for.
That wasn't me.
Say hi to the mailman.
The planning board is
August
planning,
12th.
yep, with a possible second date, I believe, of the 19th, if necessary. I didn't have to run upstairs.
Do we expect a good deal of response between now and then from the public, to Dana's point?
I don't know, but Marblehead certainly managed to stir up a lot of public response.
Yeah, again, I'd be really cautious about, further deliberation or, talking about this in this meeting when it wasn't on the agenda. I think deciding on when you should have the next meeting is a good idea to start discussion of it.
Get your lunch ready.
All right, so for the time being, Tim, let's leave it this way. We'll wait until after the first public meeting, and then just kind of call it at that point whether we want to have a meeting in advance of their recommendations. But we will certainly have a meeting either on the day of their preliminary or shortly thereafter. Fair enough?
Okay.
Terrific.
Okay. All right, so any other business? And if not, I think a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
All right, is it second?
I'll second.
Melanie seconds, so roll call vote. Tim,
Aye.
Deborah,
Aye.
Dan,
Aye.
Melanie,
Aye.
Bob votes aye. I think that's it, right? Okay.
Josie votes aye.
Who? Oh, Josie, you're listed as library, so I no, the library votes
Yeah,
aye.
it's okay.
Okay, unanimous.
Thank you.
Unanimous vote in favor. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.